Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Palm Sunday. I can't tell you how much I miss. I woke up this morning. You want to hear what I dreamed about? This is really important that you know what I dreamt last night. I woke up actually stressed out because I dreamt I was in the narthex of a Lutheran church, and the church was packed, and it was Palm Sunday, and the other pastor, it was like a couple minutes before the worship service, said, "God's blessings to you on your sermon." And, you know, this is just what pastors dream about. As in, no, that's what they nightmare about. And, yeah, and I was like, and I was thinking, my God, I don't have my sermon done, and I've got 5 minutes. And I was like, I got to find something. And I was trying to get to my office, and people were stopping me and saying, hello, you know, and small talk. And then I woke up. So... It is. It's absolutely difficult right now when for 23 years you're just you're trained like a gerbil that Holy Week is here, and bam, it's the highest, most intense week of the entire year. And I woke up this morning, and I don't have to lead a worship service. I don't have to do a sermon. A Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Easter. I just get to sit along with you good folk and enjoy it alongside of you. So so I told myself that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to enjoy sitting and being fed God's word this Holy Week. Hey, we're going to finish up our discipleship Bible study. I was thinking, and on the way over, we've been at it for 4 weeks already. You could almost toss the first one out, though, because it's like I was getting used to you, you were getting used to me, and then by second week we were like, okay, forget that, let's dive in. And then we had 2 weeks of diving in, and now this is our wrap-up. So I almost feel like we got shortchanged on our time to really start digging in. I was telling Pastor Bondo, I said, I feel like this Bible study, we've been painting, with one of those push brooms. We've been talking about discipleship with that wide of a brush stroke, when discipleship has so many different variations, and we could really even get down to some nitty-gritty issues of how do we do this, how do we carry it out, how do we live it in our lives. So he said, so then Pastor Bono goes, so you're wanting to come back. And he goes, well, then you better have PowerPoint next time. He goes, because he goes, it's $25 more if you do PowerPoint. He goes, I'm just kidding. We're going to finish up. Maybe there will be a chance to talk about it. We're still going to have to, we have no choice. We still have to do discipleship in a broad stroke. So if you've noticed, we've been focusing on Luke chapter 9, 4 Sundays. We're at the last one where it is make it your mission. Now, that we could be talking discipleship, make it your personal mission. We can talk about it as a Bible study group. We're going to make it our mission. And then we can even enlargen it up and talk about from a church aspect. This is our corporate mission. So discipleship is both personal and it is corporate. It is individual, you, and it is also Grace Lutheran Church. So we kind of have to talk about both. So we'll do that. Okay. The introduction. In 1985, Coca-Cola executives got together with a consultant. It was at that era in which Pepsi was making huge inroads into Coca-Cola's business, and there was grave concern that if this trend continues, we're going to be number 2 behind Pepsi. So when they got together in 1985 with the consultant asked the executives who were gathered, he got out a whiteboard, took out a black one of those black markers, drew a box, and said, decide on one word that you want to put inside the box that is Coca-Cola. The end word that they came up with was taste. And based on that one word, taste, they decided if Pepsi has this refreshing, sweet taste, then we need to adjust our standards. We need to meet the new style, the new America. We need to have a new taste. And so they developed what became known as New Coke. New Coke. Remember that? Those of you who are old enough? Big campaign, big splash. And all of a sudden, it debuted, New Coke. And it absolutely lost its fizzle. It was a total failure, to the point that within a couple of weeks after its debut, the executives realized, my God, we have done something absolutely wrong. They got together, minus the consultant. They put the box back up on the whiteboard, and they said, the key word can't be taste. That's a failure. If we were wrong on that, what is the one word? And you know what one word they came up with? Tradition. And then they came back with Coke Classic. And ever since they hearkened back to their heritage, all of America responded to the preservation of what Coke was known for, and Pepsi has always been a number two ever since. If you have a whiteboard in your life and you drew a box and you had to put one word, what would it be? One word.
Saved.
Saved. At the portal of Holy Week, what one word counts? You could say cross, you could say Christ, you could say Jesus. Would you say that that's the encapsulation of Christianity and of what you believe, Jesus? How does that one word then impact your life? How does that one word, if you're going to kind of market it to the world, how does that one word then impact others? So if we're really going to talk discipleship, maybe we don't have to, maybe it's not even a program. It's not about marketing. It's just understanding what is the one core value, the one word that sums up who I am and why am I here. And what do I exist for? Where am I going? And you can't answer any of those questions unless you get that one word, which is going to be Jesus. Here's what I'd like you to do is, if that is true, and that is something that is part of our heritage, that is that's our culture. We can't get away from it. This is what we believe. I want you to see that as we go through this little last snippet from Luke chapter 9, and then see as Jesus prepares to leave earth, and in his last couple of years of life, you can see where the emphasis is going to be. How do we continue the core value, the core mission of who we are and what we exist for here in order to do? Okay, from Luke chapter 9, verses 1 through 6, Jesus sends out the 12. When Jesus had called the 12 together, he gave them power and authority to drive out all demons and to cure diseases, and he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. He told them, take nothing for the journey, no staff, no bag, no bread, no money, no extra shirt. Oofta. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that town. If people do not welcome you, leave their town and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. And so they set out and went from village to village, proclaiming the good news and healing people everywhere. A couple of things. Why is that verse 1 important? Why is it so important to know that Jesus gave them power and authority? Why is that so important? Yeah, it's not their power, it's not their authority, but this is Jesus giving his power and his authority. And when you say to drive out demons, to cure diseases, why? Because, well, there are two things in this section. One, there's the message, the proclamation that Jesus is sending them out to do, which you find in, verse 2. Proclaim the kingdom of God. And then you go to verse 6. They did. They went out proclaiming what? The good news. And yet the proclamation is always accompanied by demonstrations. The proclamation of the message is backed up with, and here's the power that is behind it. So you have Jesus handing down his power, making sure divine power that can only heal those who are physically sick is also the same power that can be able to save and heal spiritually those who are sin sick as well. So power and authority that is backing up the message with the demonstrations as well. It's interesting then, why did Jesus say, take nothing for the journey? Take nothing. Ever wonder why he said that? Take nothing for the journey. No backpack, no luggage, no cell phones.
Trust in him.
Total trust in him to be able to take care of all of their needs. Along with, you see the priority, what is the real priority? Don't get distracted by what you need to bring with you, but go. Do it. This is so urgent, just I'll take care of all of your needs, just do it. And so they went. No staff, no bag, no bread, no money, no extra shirt. Can you imagine that? Does that sound like a good plan? But who's telling you to do this? Yeah, it's Jesus, the same one who says, go find me a ride this morning. Oh yeah, and here it is. Takes care of the needs.
Plus, if they take nothing, it gives the people in the village two things. It gives them more encouragement to connect with the people in the villages, and also gives those people an opportunity to serve.
Most definitely, especially with that next verse, whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that town, whatever house you enter. And it's interesting, you're going to find another Bible passage later on in our Bible study that talks about don't house shop, trying to say, well, we'll start in this, let's see, oh, these people, yeah, this is the fixer-upper, but ooh, now this guy, he's got 5-bedroom, 3-bath, and a swimming pool and back. Ooh, I think I want to stay there. Yeah, so watch out. You're not here for being able to go from house to house in that way. God will take care of your needs. Keep focused on the mission. Would you do something? Do under number 1 on the first page, at your tables, take a couple minutes to be able to review those 4 Bible passages and apply it to that statement. Discipleship and disciple making are simply forms of our lives around Jesus and helping others to do the same. So just in your groups, go one by one, look them up, read them, and say, now what's that got to do with discipleship? And how about in 5 minutes, we'll get together and we'll just kind of talk about it together. Go ahead. All right. You guys all good? Should we keep going? All right. And I guess, this is the one bad thing. What a beautiful room, but what a big room. I wish all of you had microphones right now. So yeah, or at least one at your table to be able to speak up. Well, just because I'd like to ask you, what did you find out about discipleship and disciple making from those 4 passages? Matthew chapter 28, the most well-known one, right? It's even got a nickname. What's it called? Yeah. But it's amazing if you take the word see away from it, and that's how easy it is for a church to get distracted away from it. Okay, there's only one command that is given in Matthew chapter 28. What is it? What's the command? Yeah, you would think that it's go, until you learn the Greek language, the original language that it was written in, and you find out go is not the main word. It's not. You know what it is? Make disciples. That's the one imperative that Jesus gave to his church. Make disciples. Now, how are you going to make disciples? And then you go back to Matthew chapter 28, and you find that there are 3 follow-ups to doing it. Number 1, you make disciples by going, right? Which means going means you're going to be going outside of your comfort zone. Going means you're going outside of your life. That means you're going into the lives of others. Disciple making. Yeah. If you're staying nice, safe inside your little bubble, then it's going to be you may be falling in danger of the great omission in your life that Christ has given to you. The command, make disciples for me. So by going, by baptizing, and by teaching. So those 3, there actually are like 3 participles that line up like train cars right behind make disciples. By going, by baptizing, right, sacraments, and by teaching, and not just teaching whatever you think, but teaching what Christ teaches. Telling people to obey everything that Christ has given to us, Christ teaches us, which I really like, because that means whatever Christ teaches doesn't go out of style. It's still good, even to this day, and even in a changing culture. They're finding out that studies have been done on teenagers, and they're finding out teenagers, even in the midst of so much change that's happening in our secular culture, teenagers are starving for stability. All they yearn for is something that doesn't change. How cool is that? So here we have kind of an unchanging mandate from our Lord. Say, well, then just teach them everything that I have given to you. And then what a comfort that it will never change. That will never change. The cross never changes. Baptism, the power behind it, never changes. Yep. Okay, that was Matthew chapter 28. What'd you find out in Luke chapter 10? What about Luke chapter 10, those verses for discipleship and disciple making? The sending out of how many? 72. Yeah, who's doing the sending? Yeah, Jesus is doing the sending out of them. And if you read it, that was kind of similar to what we just read from Luke chapter 9, wasn't it? And then when he sends them out, did you pick up on another thing? Jesus told them no house switching. You get to a house, stay in the house. In other words, focus on what the message is going to be. Focus on your work, not on the comfort, making sure your needs are being met. Yeah. So no house switching on that. But Jesus is sending them out. And how did he send them out? Why? Why would Jesus send them out 2 by 2? Is he afraid that they're going to be lonely? Yeah.
Maybe, but you're first important. Somebody to talk to, somebody to tell you you're doing something right, or tell you, maybe you should approach this from a different way.
If you grew up on a farm, why do they take horses and put them up with two?
Because you can't do it all, you can't do it alone.
Yeah, you can't do it alone. What a great, you see the mechanism that Jesus is training us for disciple making. It doesn't have to be like some kind of a huge program, but it's just simply, why don't you two, you go out together? I would have been fascinated by if Jesus he said, yeah, like you go out, you two go together. Here's the master matchmaker sending them out 2 by 2, right? So they're not alone, and yet one horse maybe one horse can pull about 1,000 pounds. Put 2 horses together and they can pull 3,000 pounds. So just that strength there are teams, and so Jesus is setting up a foundation. You're not alone. You do have the backup, but we used to have all kinds of mission teams down to. Would you believe it? Usually in February and March is when they would want to come down to Port Orange, Florida, and which was real interesting. So we probably, I bet you, over the course of 15 years, we had well over 100 high schoolers or college students that came from all different shapes, stripes, and they would come down to Port Orange, and they're basking in the sun, so they would have a lot of fun. We make sure they'd have a lot of fun, but then the second part of it was simply you're here to assist and partner with us in the mission. And in the earlier years, we would just have them going door to door, do a lot of postcards, and then I thought, how does that help teach them about going out? And if you're just doing something as harmless as putting a rubber band around a doorknob and then that's it, and that after a while, that's what are we teaching them? Well, then they were just the worst thing that ever happened to one of them was they got attacked by a red squirrel. So last year we switched it up, and we sent them into parking lots that would allow for it, and they were just approaching people and just doing something, especially young parents, because we were thinking about starting a Lutheran elementary school, and just got them to engage people. The first couple days they came back and they said, "This sucks." Just because number one, what do you think that they were meeting? It simply came down to the fact that number one, they just wore. Believe it or not, teenagers just wear their emotions right on their face, and they were uncomfortable, and they didn't. It's just approaching people. And then when you approach people and say, would you mind if I have 3 questions that we're conducting a Port Orange survey. Would you mind participating and giving us your opinion? And that was the whole thing. It's just make sure that you're asking them for their opinion, not to tell them something. Anyway, it was interesting from the start of the week to the end of the week that they were gauging the interest of our community as for having a private parochial Lutheran school. In a town of 61,000, there was no private education. So is that something you would be interested or not? And once they got over their fear, and then they reverted back to their teenage giggly selves, taking selfies, and then all of a sudden they started taking selfies of the people that they were interviewing or giving the survey to. All of a sudden it became fun, and it was amazing what they came up with. In just a short couple of hours, they identified 100 families that said, yeah, let me know, put me on the list, let me know if you're thinking about starting that up, because I got kids, I may be interested in something like that. Anyway, sending them out 2 by 2, even in the parking lots, Jesus sending them out 2 by 2 into villages, and that's all it says. How do they go about being able to proclaim the message? It can come in any shape, way, or size. So that was, I share that with you because when we get to the back side of, we're going to be looking at what was the method that Jesus had for disciple making, and then we're going to look at what about disciple making today, okay? John chapter 13, 34 and 35. What did you learn about being a disciple and disciple making from John 13, 34 to 35? What'd you learn? And in typical Lutheran fashion, what'd you learn about it? Anybody? Please.
Well, I thought this is like, some of these pastors saying, what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to do it? This was like, what does success look like? How do you know if you're doing it right? And it's because people will know you by your action. They'll know you're disciples because they'll see them loving other people, loving each other, right? So this is what success should look like. That's simple.
Are Lutherans loving people? Or do I back up? Let's see. Let's chase Lutherans all the way back to the pumpkins from which they came. Which would mean what culture? What heritage? Oh yeah, that's right. We're Germans. Are Germans loving people?
Order a sign of love.
Oh, immigrants. Down in Florida, they would always ask me, first of all, nobody in Florida knows what a Lutheran is. And then when they came to church, you see, for them it was just about going to church, not about what church. Then they'd find out that you're a Lutheran church. And so you would explain that. But then they would find out that you're a Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod Church. Yeah, like it's some kind of, I got a tablet right underneath here, and just in case I have to, I'm out of here. But then they would find out, and oftentimes that's, why Wisconsin? And they were like, why would you call yourself Wisconsin down in Florida? And you would just explain to them it's just history, right? That's just where immigrants came off the boat and they started making cheese and brewing beer in Milwaukee. That's what I would tell people in Florida. That's it. Yep. So the one word though for being a disciple and disciple making that I think is absolutely critical and put in all caps if you're writing it down, it's got to be love. That is amazing from a Lord who knows in a couple of hours I am going to be dying, and his concern is that his disciples, long after he has left earth, are still carrying out disciple making with his power and with his authority, but accompanied by one word: love. Love. That is food for thought with everything that we do and how we portray ourselves. How do we go out into villages or into parking lots? Is it I suppose love in a way that's our feelings toward, and our displays of, is love driving it, right? Any thoughts and comments? Because that passage, number one, I love that passage, but two, I think that's, without that passage, without Jesus saying that, that is a way of totally shaping a different direction for disciple making, don't you think?
I think love as a language is a non-secular as well as a secular language as well. So you can speak that language regardless of whether or not you believe in Jesus or not. So if you lead with love, it's easier to be involved with the conversation with somebody and bring them into your fold just by speaking.
I'm glad you brought that up. What does love look like? And maybe sometimes it's easier to understand what it looks like by citing examples of what it shouldn't look like. So there is a Luther Prep graduate from about 3 years ago. She went to Wisconsin Lutheran College, and then this year she switched after the first 2 years because she wants to get more into the arts. So she went to a private public school down in Atlanta, Georgia, right smack downtown, because it zeroes in on what she wants to be able to study. So now she grew up in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. Now she lives in Atlanta downtown without a car, And if you know Atlanta whatsoever, that's number one. That's a different culture. And that's a huge city, except now. So here she is, she's maybe 20, 21 years old. And now she's away from home for the first time after all of her WELS background. And now she's in the heart of Atlanta, except all the WELS churches are outside of Atlanta in the suburbs. And to get from downtown to the suburbs is a 45-minute drive. So here she is without a vehicle. Now what does she do? Well, you do what a college student does, and she hooked up with fellow classmates, friends, and they're doing personal Bible studies, fellow Christians, right? And so she gets together with them to talk about Christ, Bible study, and but then she stopped going. You know why? Because the leader of the group was telling her, why don't you go to church with me? She just didn't feel comfortable. It didn't feel right. It was part of a college campus group that's called the Navigators. And so why aren't you doing that? And almost as if the way you prove yourself to be a Christian is by you're worshiping on Sunday morning with us. And that was it. And she said his attitude toward her and how he almost ridiculed her in front of others for it totally turned her off. Anyway, for some reason I was talking with her a couple months ago, and I said, well, what are you going to do? And she goes, well, unless I can somehow get out to the suburbs, she goes, which is nigh to impossible, she goes, I'll have to look up things online. And so we talked about, well, what are you looking up online? She goes, there are sermons that we're always talking about, and so we review on Sundays what those sermons are. And I said, how's that going? She goes, it's very lively discussion. And I said, well, and now what? And she goes, I feel like I don't fit in and I'm by myself, which she is. Very strong in faith. So I told her, why don't you start your group? So why don't you invite now some fellow college students to get together? You know why I told her to do that? Because she said there are other students that are coming to her and saying you're different, but in a good way. They said how you carry yourself is so different from how many fellow students do that. They could tell a difference between her and without even having talked about it. Just, isn't that amazing? That how you carry yourself as a believer of Christ. People really do see that. And they actually are coming to her for that. So it just told me the importance of discipleship. There is this section from high schoolers through college age. I think we have to do a lot better job of being able to give them resources so they can go out. They are so much better than us at being able to share their faith with their fellow peers. So being able to give them the resources. And you know what the number one thing is? I'm going on tangents, which is really good today. If you want to go on a tangent, that's fine. Is apologetics. I think that is one area. I'm intrigued. I think apologetics can make a comeback in 21st century Christianity. Apologetics, you know what that is? Apologetics is being able to take a question that a secular person throws at you. For example, it could be creation and evolution. Why would you believe that the world was created in 6 years when all the scientific data has already proven that it is hundreds and hundreds of millions of years? Why would you believe that, right? And I wonder sometimes if a lot of us just go, we don't have an answer for that. Why? Because I don't know why. You ever find yourself struggling with those kind of questions? You're the church body that demeans women, aren't you? It's just we're just not prepared. Why would you do that when we live in 21st century America that shows a respect and equality for them? Yeah, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
Because, like you say, we haven't paid enough attention to apologetics, which is so critical.
Have you ever got into those discussions?
Goodness, yes.
With others? Discussions with other people? Who won? Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. Please.
I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I work at Northwestern Publishing House, and there's a book right now that is being printed. It's called Quick to Listen, and it's apologetics from outside the wells. So listening to like evolutionary people and listening to what their arguments are, so that and actually listening rather than just talking first. So and it's various topics in there, but it came from interviews outside of what people find to be objectionable about Christianity and their arguments, and coming from that point of view. And it's going to be used in a class at MLC. So it won't be available this year yet, but
it's coming out.
Yeah.
Very good.
So it's somebody else's brainchild, and said we have to look at it from this direction.
I think that there are enough people that are actually understanding that now, both in schools and on a wider basis, that we have to do something about it. Now, what are we going to do about it? I think for us being able to get together in a Sunday morning Bible study, this may work for us, but it's not going to work for a high school teenager. If for them, they want something that is short, like a 1-minute response, right? Show me the YouTube that tells me the answer. So something that can just encapsulates the whole thing in that 60 seconds.
I'm going to go on a different tangent. Now I go back to your story about the young girl. Something that concerns me when I hear you told the story, and that we're talking about loving one another, and I maybe don't know the whole story, but this is a perfect example of where a young person has come going to college in Atlanta, 45 minutes away from all these different congregations. I would hope that they had made some contact with some of those churches, right? And that someone back in those churches would say, hey, I can't come and get you every week, but I could come and get you once a month. That's how you show Christian love. You used to let the kid hang out there and say, well, I'm sorry, we don't come into the city. When there are students in the city that would like to come out to the suburbs churches, that's how you show love. That's how you do that, I think. Our son was an example of that. Went to school in San Diego, didn't have a vehicle, and by golly, the church that was 45 minutes away, they found somebody, or would assist, not every Sunday because they couldn't, but someone loved him enough to come out and pick him up.
Yep, that's it.
Back in his San Diego church. And so we really appreciate it. And the pastor took an active interest in it. So I heard that story. It's like, well, hey, you're on your own. You're living down in Atlanta. That's your problem.
Yeah.
There's somebody we know. Somebody must come across once in a while.
Yeah, it's even more encouraging is there is a brand new, they call it In-Town Mission. There's a new Wells group that is gathering, and so I did tell her that they don't have a church or anything, but they meet in a coffee shop. And they do it weekly, so there are weekly Bible studies straight downtown. So there are ways. It's just, how do we find? What's the network in which we are able to find each other? Yeah. I liked your point, though, on discipleship and disciple making is very much it's not a program. It's more one-on-one kind of a thing. Yeah, that's important. Anyone else? Anyone else on that? Okay, we looked at Luke chapter 6, verse 40. That was an interesting passage. Did you pick up in Luke 6:40 about discipleship? Actually, it talked about disciples, right? The word disciple, I suppose in its basic meaning, you think of followers, right? Someone who follows. In its original context, it was used someone who is a pupil, as opposed to someone who is a teacher. And so everyone, and then the interesting thing, everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. And I love that because the Apostle Paul encouraged us, be imitators of Christ, therefore, as dearly loved children. To be Christ-like, to be like Jesus, requires a growing discipleship within our lives. Because one who is fully trained, not partially trained, not you get to a certain level and then you kind of plateau in your faith, in your discipling of life. But fully trained is just that, are you continuing to be trained? Ongoing development. Right. If ongoing development is important in the corporate world, why would it not be so in our spiritual lives? Why would we get to a certain point and then kind of take your foot off the gas pedal and say, I'm doing just fine in my faith? But being able to keep, and I believe, and here's another tangent, I wonder sometimes, it's because we don't have some kind of an intentional plan for how do we continue to develop ourselves. I mean, when was the last time you sat down with a piece of paper and said, how do I want to keep growing in my faith? Okay, what am I doing right now? What will take me to the next level? How do I continue to get fully entrained? Have we ever intentionalized some kind of a game plan for ourselves personally on what does my growing in being a disciple of Jesus? I believe the level that you are growing in being a disciple of Jesus has something to do with the level of interest you have in discipling someone alongside of you. So if your faith is kind of like a declined or plateaued or even starting to go down, you're not going to have an interest in others. You're just going to be like trying to take care of yourself. But to get to a discipleship that actually says, this isn't about me. This is actually, I want to connect and let this be about someone else. Discipleship. That's what Jesus was doing with his disciples. It wasn't about him, even though everything revolved around him, but it was about someone else. Always about someone else. To get to that point where our purpose in life isn't about me, but it's about someone else. Someone else. Did any other questions? Did you put any questions that came up with those Bible passages? Otherwise, flip the page. Number 2, those who are involved in discipleship making. Let's go through that real quick together. Go to Matthew chapter 4, 18 to 22. Matthew chapter 4, 18 to 22. As your eyes scan those verses, you'll notice that Jesus is calling his first disciples in Matthew chapter 4, 18 to 22. What are their names? The names of the first 4. Peter, Andrew, James, and John. So that's the calling of the first 4 disciples. Okay, now go to Luke chapter 6, verse 13. So the first 4 disciples, Jesus says, come follow me, be disciples. Peter, Andrew, by the way, they were brothers, so there was a connect between them. James and John, oh yeah, they were brothers too, right? Starts in a very small concentric circle. Okay, then you get to Luke chapter 16. How many names are listed there? Luke chapter 6, verse 13. I'm sorry, verse 13. Luke chapter 6, verse 13. Now how many are there? 12. Have you ever thought to yourself, why? What's so sacred about the number 12? I know that you can go back to the Old Testament and say, well, Pastor, yeah, you could do it. There were 12 tribes, right? But you would think that, and these were very much designated because they actually came not just with the designation of Jesus' 12 disciples, but he designated them apostles. So they were set aside for not just upper echelon, they were set aside for a very special purpose, that special designation. You know, I don't know about your pastors. I think they go by the word pastor, not apostles, right? Apostle Jim. James, Apostle James either, right? So there are the 12, and yet what's interesting is when you go through that, scan those names, and you find little nicknamey things alongside of it. Like I think the one of them in Luke 6:13 is zealot. Yeah, that tells you something. And it's not like he was a real go-getter. Like this is Strength Finders, and boy, he's really zealous. That this was not a positive kind of an attribute. Zealot refers to Yeah, I've got a dagger underneath my cloak, and if needs be, I'll pull it out and I'll kill a Roman. That's a zealot. Oh, and then you get to the very last name. And then what's the word that you find out about him? A traitor, right? Yep. So, and this within the 12 that Jesus had. Wow. Okay, Luke chapter 10, verse 1. We've gone through this one before. Now what is the count? Yep. So there's 72. So we've gone from 4 to 12, and then to 72. And then if you kept on with Matthew chapter 10, you find out there's a resending of the 12 again. So Jesus made them apostles, but twice he sent them out on, call it field training experiences, when he sent them out 2 by 2. And then finally you get to Matthew chapter 17. Matthew chapter 17, verse 1. Look that one up. And now, there's another configuration of them. What is it? Now, what are the names that pop up from the 12? Yeah, Peter, James, and John. So you have that little larger circle of 12, but then you have a little inner circle of 3 that is there. So if we're going to look at Jesus' disciples and say, okay, how did he structure? How did he organize himself with them? You do pick up some things of what are the circles that Jesus was working within. I'm going to take that that rate how well equipped you feel you are to share Jesus. You're going to be doing that on your own, on a scale. Whatever you put yourself in, honestly, the goal is to move yourself up and get to the number that's just to the right of whatever you circle, right? That's the whole point. I'm interested, though, in going to the last part, since we only got a couple of minutes. Jesus' method of disciple making. From the Bible passages that we've looked at today, any thoughts come to your head? Did Jesus have a method of making disciples? What are you picking up from those verses? Any thoughts come to your head? Yeah.
Jesus could look at their hearts. It seems like he just walked up to them, up to the boat, and said, hey, you and you, come on. But he knew what was in their hearts. It wasn't just, hey, you're tired of being fishermen, I'll show you how to do something else.
Yeah. Do you think Jesus knew, because he knew their hearts, do you think Jesus also knew the future as he called Judas to come follow him and be his disciple? Designated? So if he knew it, then why? Yeah.
It must happen to Scripture. Meaning, he says it's must happen. It must be condemned in hell.
Yeah, it's, and if you look at it from Judas, you would say, well, Judas was screwed from the start, right? He never had a chance. Came out, and there's his mom saying, I got to call you Judas. Yeah, here's the betrayer. Or if you look at every word that Jesus, especially during Holy Week, says to Judas, it absolutely reeks of love. You know, that whole John 13, he's just, even to the very end, Judas, are you going to betray me with a kiss? Just this love and this concern for who Judas is. And I think that always astounds me. So Jesus, knowing the future, and yet still has such a love and a concern for him all the way to the end. It just shows you power and influences of this world, and yet the love that ultimately was able to overcome the world this week. Yeah. Cindy.
When you look at the 12, there's no stereotype. It's a real mix of people in that.
Thank you. There is. I see. There's no degree. There's no outside of no background, and none of them can claim even what the Apostle Paul claimed to be a Jew of the Jews, as far as being able to keep the laws. He goes, I was just on point. I was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. And then Paul realized all of that background pedigree actually became a stumbling block to him. And so what does Jesus do? He utilizes people who They were just like you. Yeah. Can you imagine if Jesus came into our world and then said, I want you, hey, you, come follow me. I need to make you a fisher of men. It wouldn't be, he would not be finding them at Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary, but he would find them in this room. So disciple makers are not the ones who lead congregations. They are not the ones with divine calls. They are, however, you, based on Jesus, who has called you from darkness into light and from unbelief into belief. Anything else? I'll give you two things that I thought was remarkable. Was the fact that, number one, Jesus went small. In order to get big with the church, he first starts small. It's almost like he taught the crowds, but he trained the group. He formed them into and said, I'm going to get 12. They are going to be the superstructure, the infrastructure. They're going to be the skeleton on which I am going to build my church. And then when you look at the New Testament church, after Jesus trained them for 3 years, now you look at the Apostle Paul. He adopts the same methodology for disciple making as Jesus had. Paul trained Timothy. And then Timothy, those early leaders, they trained faithful groups. So they started small. And yet, even in that small group of 12, Jesus had that core, that inner core, that, call them the three, that, how do you say it? That's the malt inside the chocolate malt ball. And that's... and I think if you look at it from that discipleship making, that every congregation needs that really solid core group. So my first one was just the focus on the few. And then number two, Jesus' methodology is then the multiplication. You look at the sheer amount of time. 9/10 of Jesus' ministry from the gospel is based upon his time that is spent with his disciples in training. And if Jesus had not done that, it's almost like Jesus knew, I'm going to start with these 12 because eventually I'm going to get all of America. And he just, the continual ripple effect to the ends of the earth. So I wonder if well, okay, let's go to the second part. It says, disciple making today. What do we learn? What can we learn from the methodology of Jesus with disciple making? What can we learn from it? Yeah.
Training, like we are well at our Christians in elementary school.
I believe that being able to, I wonder if maybe we need to be looking at in the future more training. A higher level of really intentional training of the few. I don't believe there have been some people who've come to me because discipleship is really a restarting on the synod level. It's a restarting of a position that has been dormant and gone for the better part of a decade. And I've actually had a couple of people come up to me and say, please don't give us another program. Some kind of a discipleship program, the top 8 points, ways that you're going to be able to do it. You do this, and in 6 weeks, you're going to have, no more flash in the pan programs. And I think I hear them, and if I hear what Jesus is saying, there is, number one, I have to gut check my heart and say, is discipleship being driven by love, the love component? Number two, be able to focus on the intimate, how do I want to say this? I believe disciple making is highly relational. It's very intimate and highly relational. I don't think that discipleship was ever meant to be mass production, but more of a one-on-one walking alongside of just one person, right? Please.
Has evangelism in our day and age taken over disciple? What is the term? Discipleship? Has evangelism taken over discipleship?
Yes, I believe that it has, and which is so interesting because I believe evangelism is like set apart from discipleship. Like evangelism happens first, step one, then you're a disciple of Jesus, and then discipleship begins. I believe discipleship has to swing over on the front side of evangelism and do it Oreo cookie style. I think evangelism is the cream center. Discipleship has to be the first cookie, and sandwich evangelism in between. I sometimes wonder why aren't we disciple makers? Because I believe we have to address ourselves as being disciples of Jesus. And can we be better disciples of Jesus? Can we elevate our commitment to the point, a commitment that says, where Jesus says, make more disciples for me? That's not a program. That's Jesus' call to me. Are we looking at that as a personal call of Christ? All right, I'm at 5 after. I have to stop. Yeah. This would be interesting, and maybe in the future, I'll talk to Pastor Bondo, but I would be interested in coming back here maybe later this fall, or maybe a year from now, and being able to talk about, if this is true, then what does discipleship look like within our own families? Because I think our families are getting run down. I particularly would like to talk about parents. Are parents going AWOL? And is the mentality that they're forfeiting the training of their children to the church, the pastor and the church, youth groups and catechism? And where are the parents in all of this? I think that, to me, that is going to be number one. With it, especially if we look ahead to the next 25, 50 years, if we're leaking the younger generation, that our greatest losses right now are happening on 21-year-olds and younger. If that is where we're leaking and they're abandoning ship, what are we doing to shore it up? And I think it's not during high school, it's when they come out of the womb. And then there's that first 10 to 15 years. I think we have to shore that up. Yeah. Anyway, should we do that for maybe a year from now? All right, I look forward to you. Thank you for just the privilege of being and gathering with you guys. Can we end in prayer? Heavenly Father, we're at the portal, the entry of a very holy week. Help us as your disciples, as we follow you, the difficult journey into the Garden of Gethsemane. Strengthen us even as we see your abandonment and then recount our abandonment oftentimes in our life for you. We thank you, though, for the cross where we can confess it and receive forgiveness for it. And on the other side of Easter Sunday, strengthen and empower us with your authority to be able to go out and to realize, if this was not about you, but you made us your chief focus, help us now to be able to make others the focus for our personal ministry as disciple makers. We do this for your glory and for eternal salvation's good. In Jesus' name we pray this. Amen. Hey, thank you all. God's blessings to you on Easter. Oh, not at all. Not at all. Thank you for your time.